9:15 here on the morning show with Jeff and Will, AM 1700 WRCR, Haverstraw, WRCR.com. Welcome back, everyone, and welcome now Tina Traster, editor of RCBizJournal.com. Good morning, Tina.
Good morning, Rockland World. How is everybody?
Rockland World is lovely this morning. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a little tired of the cold weather, but I'm good.
One of the articles I did want to bring up to you, if you don't mind, I was fascinated by this article about the Wellington Education Initiative. The reason why is because I grew up in the Chestnut Ridge area, and I'm very familiar with that location, and it was just 2 weeks ago that my parents and I were talking about, this place over across from the promenade on Schoolhouse Road, they're never going to build anything over there. There's just been these trees there. Why can't they build something over there? What's the deal? And now all of a sudden the place is cleared and they're ready to build something.
The word cleared is an understatement, and scorched earth is a better description.
It's unbelievable how this just happened. We just happened to be talking about this not 2 weeks ago.
Well, I think the unbelievable thing is that, honestly, the permission to be able to clear it like that. I mean, just every single tree, every bit of life has been cleared off that piece of land. And, sure, whatever they develop, I guess they can put in some saplings, but I don't know. Just from an ecological standpoint, that's the thing about that I found so jarring was the kind of scorched earth of it. But there you go. Moving on. Speaking of trees and people who do not tell a lie, I thought that I would do something a little different today, if the county can indulge me. I thought that I would read an essay that we published called Thoughts on This President's Day Celebration and What's at Stake. So I shall read, if that is okay with everybody. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Read away.
Okay. So, George Washington was a man of complexity. Ron Chernow's biography paints a portrait of a nuanced and complicated man, which offers us a history lesson to a nation at risk. I am plodding through Ron Chernow's animated tome, Washington A Life, which feels especially relevant as we gear up to mark President's Day this Monday, and while witnessing a grueling and deeply divisive contest for the next leader of this nation. Like many, I had a basic knowledge of the lore and cliché tales that encapsulate the man who led the Continental Army to victory in the American Revolutionary War, who presided at the Constitutional Convention of 1787, and who held the first title of President of the United States. Every American is weaned on images of the wan, stoic man wearing a powdered wig, sitting astride a white steed, or standing stiffly in his blue coat over yellow regimentals, leaning ever so subtly upon a sword. Behind that carefully crafted persona was the man who came to embody American grit and determination. But in Chernow's pages, we meet an undereducated man who knew his shortcomings, a man who enjoyed privileges and exploitations of the landed gentry, a man who held conflicting views of what freedom meant and who should have it, a man who married a widow but never fathered his own children, a man who led a ragtag army that failed miserably for a long, long and bloody time before it found its way, a man who appeared to be happiest at his beloved Mount Vernon in Virginia. This is the man I've been getting to know as limned by Chernow's portrait. I like him, George Washington, not so much because of his well-known heroism, but because of his vulnerability, human foibles, doubts, humility, quiet sense of humor, even tenderness. Details that stand out are the way he grappled with the challenges and cycles of running a farm, raising Martha's sick daughter and her entitled king son, negotiating and navigating his ambivalent feelings between the crown and an emerging nation wanting autonomy, wrestling over his role and duties as the leader of the Continental Army while pining bitterly for civilian life. Many times, while on the battlefront, Washington communicates to those tending the farm back home. He has a photographic memory of where every tree is planted, and what needs doing. Speaking of trees, what emerges from this animated portrait is a man who is steady, a man with a steady and measured temperament, who at times battles long illnesses, a man who today might be considered a dandy for his great attention to clothing and style. Long before television, and subsequently every other form of media, turned presidents and notable people into daily fodder, a man like Washington was largely able to get on with his day, with the task at hand, make mistakes, huddle with advisors, and focus on what was important and urgent without daily updates on gaffes or missteps. He was not preoccupied with press conferences and image making and the next election cycle. Yes, it's simplistic to idealize a time that to us seems so unadulterated and uncomplicated, though of course there's nothing romantic about a threadbare army and fighting smallpox by taking pus from light pustules from a sick person and injecting that pus into the skin incision or directly into a vein to inoculate someone against illness. But a man like Washington, inspired by the trappings of public opinion, 24-hour news cycle, and a global communications device that turns every moment of modern day into a meme, commentary, metaphorical gunpowder to keep us at war with each other all day, every day. Washington had to win over loyalists before our great nation took shape. Consensus is not an easy task, but nearly 250 years later, America will celebrate its 250th anniversary in 2026. We are, at least now, still a nation founded on freedom and democracy, ideals we hold to be sacred, though we disagree over what those terms mean. His Revolutionary War comrade, Henry Lee, eulogized him as, quote, first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. The question is, how much dissension and vilifying can we bear before we cannibalize one another and our history and ethos with it? Every nation must grow and morph and conform to new challenges, but we are facing choices. Do we find a way to overcome difficulty together, or do we end up impaling ourselves with intolerance and dysfunction? It feels to me like we're at a pivotal moment in our history. Choices made will carry great weight. Today, let's think about Washington, who was born on Feb 22nd, 1732, amid the pleasures we take during a 3-day weekend. On this federal government holiday, let's also honor all those who served as President of the United States. Over decades, for better or worse, presidents have led us through dark periods, but we've always held on to the belief that no matter who occupied the White House, the country was built on solid fundamentals that would preserve who we set out to be. Last summer, I visited Mount Vernon. I was struck by its beauty and its simplicity, sitting on a bluff overlooking the Potomac River. On the guided tour through the house, one of the last stops was the room where Washington slept. Of course, he slept in a lot of places. As the story goes, on December 12, 1799, Washington inspected his farms on horseback. He returned home late and had guests for dinner, sitting down for the meal without changing his damp clothes from the inclement weather of the day. He had a sore throat the next day, but was well enough to mark trees for cutting. That evening, Washington complained of chest congestion. His condition worsened, 4 doctors attended to him, but he died 2 days later with Martha seated at the foot of his bed. His last words were, "'Tis well." He was 67. He left us with a raw piece of clay, a country on the dawn of formation. He was an example of leadership, a model. What we do with our template is up to us, but history holds its lessons. The one trait that stands out above all others in Cherno's expansive biography on Washington was the man's decency. It went a long way. That's my essay.
Thank you, Tina. Something to reflect on this President's Day, as opposed to something that you would normally do with much more business related. But before we let you go, we do have a caller who has a question, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Sure. Hey, Lori from Congress, you're on with Tina Trester.
Good morning, Tina. My husband and I enjoy your show every week, but I was wondering if you could shed some light on a building that's going on in Valley Cottage, and maybe you already discussed it and I just missed it. There's a huge warehouse building in Valley Cottage, diagonally across from Valley Cottage Animal Hospital.
Right.
303.
That's Lincoln Properties warehouse, and they owned that land, and they had come to Clarkstown for permission to build what is maybe the largest warehouse, certainly in Valley Cottage, maybe in Clarkstown at this point so far. It's 225,000 square feet. I think, what?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there was a ton of opposition to this project. And if you go on rcbizjournal.com and put in Lincoln Properties, you will see the progression of how they came to the planning board, and they sort of accommodated the planning board. They for example, they lowered the height of the building so that they never had to go to the zoning board where they might have had more trouble. And they made some accommodations, and they sold a little piece of land that really was irrelevant, gave a piece of land back to the town. But in the end of the day, yes, they have built a monolithic building that I think by any account is kind of a harsh thing to the eyes when you're driving along Route 303. The main issue, of course, for people at Valley Cottage Animal and the library wasn't far, and many others, was the objection to dumping more trucks onto 303, which is already, as everybody knows, a nightmare. But the planning board's assessment was that, quote, their hands were tied, and that there was nothing they could do because the traffic report, was fine. And to that point, something that's interesting right now is we reported last week on the Clarkstown Planning Board having sort of a work session with their traffic planners, because there's an acknowledgement that what happens is every traffic study comes in and says, oh, this will add 3 more cars to the road.
Tina, I apologize. We have to interrupt you there because we're running out of time, and we've got a show coming up next. We'll talk about that next week some more. Go to rcbizjournal.com and learn more about that. Lori, thanks for your question. Have a great day, and have a great President's Day, everybody. Stay tuned for Crossroads of Rockland History with Claire Sheridan. It's the morning show with Jeff and Will. Don't go away.